A shroud of fear had spread over the city, so heavy that even breathing had become difficult. The leaders of Merv knew that once the Tatar's sword was drawn, walls, armies, and numbers would be of no use. In that fear, a fragile hope was born. Perhaps through negotiation, a way to survive might be found. Clinging to that hope, the nobles of Merv entered the tent of Tolui Khan. Inside the tent, there was an unusual calm. No threats, no shouting. Tolui Khan spoke softly, mentioned sparing lives, and placed a condition of tribute. It was at this moment that the leaders of Merv believed that perhaps the door of death could be closed. Then Tolui said, "Name the wealthy citizens of the city who can pay the larger share of the tribute." It sounded like a suggestion, but in reality, it was a decision. The names of Merv's rich merchants and financiers were written by their own hands on a list. When that list reached Tolui Khan, the atmosphere of the tent changed instantly. Gentleness vanished from his face. Savage cruelty filled his eyes. There was no argument, no accusation, only a silent gesture. And the very next moment, the leaders of Merv fell to the ground, drenched in blood. At that moment, it was decided that these were not negotiations, they were the prelude to a massacre. And Merv was no longer going to be spared. On the banks of the Murghab River stood the vast, crowded, and prosperous city of Merv. Because of its beauty, it was called the Jewel of the Desert. It had great madrasas, libraries containing thousands of rare books, and markets filled with trade goods. It had once been the capital of the Seljuk sultans, and the Khwarezmian rulers spent their leisure in its enchanting gardens. Since the Tatars had bypassed Merv during their first invasion, Tolui Khan now marched towards it to complete the campaign. At some distance from Merv, on the banks of the Murghal Rud, a force of Turkmen soldiers had set up camp. These Turkmens were planning a raid to depose the current governor of Merv, Mujir al-Mulk. This was the height of the Muslim world's negligence. Even during the Tatar invasion, the remaining territories of Khwarezm were still consumed by internal conflicts, with nobles fighting each other without concern for the outcome. Tolui Khan's army blocked the route of the Turkmens. At night, as Turkmen units passed through the route one after another, the Tatars systematically slaughtered each group in turn. After completing this operation, the Tatars advanced to the outskirts of Merv, camped beyond Sharistan, and began assessing the city's location and defensive preparations. Inside Merv, besides the local population, more than 200,000 refugees from the north and east were present. All of them were determined to fight to the last breath, even though most were women, elderly people, and children, and the young men lacked experience. Despite this, they longed for martyrdom, remained hopeful for victory, and carried in their hearts the resolve to avenge past losses. As soon as news of the Tatars' arrival spread, the very walls and gates of Merv seemed to tremble. Under the leadership of the city's governor, Mujir al-Mulk, the Muslims marched out of the city, formed their ranks, and the battle began. All day long, a fierce fight continued. Swords clashed, spears broke, and the battlefield was soaked in blood. Among the Tatars was Chingiz Khan's elite guard, a unit made up of the most carefully chosen warriors of the entire Tatar nation, sent as an honor to accompany Tolui Khan. Yet the Muslims cut down 1,000 Tatar warriors on the battlefield. This news was like fuel on fire for Tolui Khan. He lost control of his anger, reorganized his forces, and launched fierce, aggressive attacks. Eventually, the Tatars gained the upper hand, and the Muslims were forced to retreat and take refuge inside the city. Now, Tolu Khan chose deception instead of the sword. After careful thought, he prepared a sinister plan. The Tatar forces fighting outside the walls were suddenly ordered to cease combat, and a message of reconciliation was sent to the governor of Merv. This unexpected softness from Tolu astonished Mujir al-Mulk, but the situation was delicate. Reports were coming from surrounding regions about the movements and actions of Sultan Jalal al-Din, and it was widely believed that within a few weeks the Sultan would march toward Merv with an organized army. In these circumstances, Mujir al-Mulk believed that if the Tatars could be kept busy in negotiations for a few weeks, it might become the key to victory. Therefore, the renowned scholar of Merv, Sheikh Jamal al-Din, was sent as an envoy to Tolu Khan. Tolu welcomed the sheikh, spoke encouragingly, and sent him back with great respect, conveying the message that if the governor himself came for a meeting, many misunderstandings could be resolved. This message rang alarm bells for the wise and thoughtful people of Merv. They declared it a clear conspiracy and tried to stop the governor. But despite all concerns, Mujir al-Mulk was unwilling to abandon the path of negotiation. He set out to Tolu Khan's tent with cash, horses, mules, and valuable gifts. Tolu gave him a warm reception, bestowed a robe of honor in return for the gifts, and arranged a banquet. After the meal, talks began. Tolu promised to spare lives and said that in return, the people of the city would have to pay tribute. For some time, discussion continued over the tribute. Then Tolu said that a few more influential people from the city should be summoned for consultation. Mujir al-Mulk called several respected figures from the city. They too were received warmly, and then Tolu ordered that 600 wealthy citizens be nominated who could pay the larger share of the tribute. After consulting his companions, Mujir al-Mulk prepared a list with his own hand, containing the names of the richest merchants and financiers of Merv. The moment this list reached Tolu Khan, his expression changed. In the very next moment, at his signal, the Tatar soldiers spared the governor, but put all the other nobles to death. Now, for the Tatars, the conquest of the city was nothing more than a formality. Through deception and trickery, the gates of the city were opened, the guards were removed, and the Tatars took control of the entrance. Within a few hours, every street and every square of Merv was under the control of armed Tatar units. Wherever resistance appeared, the sword was used. Volunteer fighters behind barricades rained stones and arrows, and Tatar soldiers also fell. But despite heavy losses, the Tatars succeeded in extinguishing the flames of resistance. After complete control of the city, Tolu Khan announced, the people of Merv should leave the city with their families and belongings. Terrified women, children, the elderly, and young men, hoping only to save their lives, lifted bundles of basic necessities and began leaving the city. For 4 days, this evacuation continued. Those who came out were stopped in a vast open field. An announcement was made. All of these are guilty of fighting against us and will be punished. Now Tolu Khan, to enjoy the final scene of his demonic plan, sat upon a golden throne. Before him stood hundreds of thousands of helpless people with bowed heads. The sobs of women and the screams of children tore through the sky. At Tolu's command, men, women, and children were separated. Then, one by one, all were subjected to extreme cruelty. Men and children were strangled or cut to pieces with swords. Women were violated and then handed over to a humiliating death. Captured nobles and officials were tortured in various ways to extract their wealth, and then they too were killed. In the search for riches, houses were demolished, foundations were torn up, and even graves were dug open. The tomb of Sultan Sanjar Seljuk was set on fire, and even his grave was destroyed. The number of those killed in Merv is said to be 700,000. It is a strange turn of fate that before this destruction, the great geographer Yaqut al-Hamawi had visited these cities and then witnessed their ruin with his own eyes. Like a devoted scholar, he continued to record everything until the Tatars themselves descended upon Merv. By fortune, he survived and reached Mosul, where in his famous work, Mu'ajam al-Buldan, he permanently recorded the elegy of Khwarezm and Khurasan. He praised generously the scholarly centers of Merv, its libraries, its scholars, and its people. Another strange reality is that despite this horrific massacre, Merv was rebuilt several times afterwards. The reason was clear. Merv stood at the crossroads of Khurasan, Iran, and Transoxiana. For countless people fleeing from other regions, it was the first major city they reached. Because it lay on major trade routes, caravans passed through it regularly, and according to Atta Malik Juvaini, the necessities of life and abundance of goods were always available there. But these very qualities ultimately became Merv's misfortune. This was not the destruction of just one city. It was a dagger driven into the heart of knowledge, civilization, humanity, and history. A wound whose screams still echo in the ears of time. Merv burned, but the question remained, did the Tatar storm stop here, or was this only the beginning? Because history bears witness that after Merv, another city was waiting for its destruction, a city whose walls were strong, but whose fate proved even weaker. In the next part, we will hear the chilling story of the destruction of Hamadan, where deception, fear, and blood would once again put the human conscience to the test. This story is not over yet. Here, as guardians of history, we turn the next page.